Welcome to the Studio Transaction Basics training video series. This video addresses how to record SAP transaction codes with Winshuttle Studio Transaction. First, you'll launch the Studio product and go to File, New. You'll then select Transaction, Create from SAP Recording, and then log in to your QA or test SAP system. At that point, you'll be able to indicate which T code you'd like to record, select the appropriate recording mode, indicate what data type you'll be using, either Excel or Access, and whether you'd like to have the recording auto-map when the recording is finished. Then we'll click Start Recording, and we're off and running. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about the different recording modes and what they mean. So the first and default recording mode is standard. This is recommended for at least 75% of your SAP recordings. And the reason for that is that the Winshuttle function module takes care of all of the settings and functionality that you'll be using automatically. Some things to note is that in this mode you can upload to SAP. You can also download data from SAP. In addition, you can use some additional features like the extended logging, as well as being able to work with long text. And then finally, this mode will run in the background. So when we run these types of recordings, we're not actually going to see SAP. Everything's going to happen in the background. One of our optional modes is batch input. This is really useful for situations where performance is of utmost importance. So these recordings are optimized for performance, but there are some limitations to be aware of as well. This mode is only available to upload data to SAP, so we can't download any information other than our final log message. Also, this mode will suppress a lot of the informational messages that may pop up. For the most part, these messages are ignored anyway, but there are instances where those messages may be coded as warnings or things that could cause issues, and so batch mode will actually suppress those. This mode does run in the background, just like standard mode, so when we do run these scripts, we're not actually going to see SAP. Finally, we have GUI scripting, and this takes into account the user settings in SAP and records mouse movements as well as keyboard strokes. If you have scrolling that is happening in tables on the SAP screen, this is the mode that you would use to be able to interact with that scroll bar. Same goes for things like tree structures. Anytime you need to be able to select a position on the screen as opposed to a more purposeful selection like a row in a table or something like that. It does require that you enable GUI scripting on the SAP server that you're recording in and running in. These scripts run in the foreground, which means that when I do run these scripts, I am going to see all of those screens flashing by. This also means that these recordings will be a bit slower. Some additional limitations, again, it does have to be enabled on the SAP server, but also at the user level. There is going to be slower processing, and screen resolution can be an issue because of that positional nature of the recording. So just be aware that if the screens are vastly different in their resolution, that's something to test. We'll actually go through and show an example of creating a new recording. So I'm here in Winshuttle Studio, and you can see I've got my steps 1, 2, 3 right here. So this is going to guide you through the script development as you progress. But we're going to click first New and then Transaction to select our module. We're going to create from SAP Recording. We'll select our SAP server from the list and log on. We'll indicate the T code that we want to record. I'm not going to change the mode. We'll stick with the default. Same for data type. And I'm going to leave this unchecked because I'd like to have more control over which fields I'm mapping. Once we start the recording, it's going to launch SAP, and then I mostly step through exactly what I would do if I were updating this record manually. There will be instances where you may take some additional steps that are slightly different than your manual process to ensure that the script will work predictably for every user regardless of their settings. So right here where I have my select views, different people could have different views selected, which could cause my script to fail if I make different selections. So the first thing I'm going to do is deselect all, select just the first view, and hit the green check. Any additional navigation will take place from within the transaction. And then it's just a matter of updating any of the fields that you want to be able to map to your data source file. So you want to keep in mind these would be the fields that you want your script to update, whether that's a fixed value and it's always going to be that value, or something that the user has control over and will be mapped to my data file. Go ahead and navigate to a couple of other tabs here. And once we've finished all of the updates that we want to make, we'll save. And Transaction is going to go ahead and process that recording. It's compiling all of the screens that I navigated to, and actually all of the fields that exist on each of those screens, whether I typed into them or not. So that's an important note when we go into the mapping video, that it does automatically bring back all of the fields that I typed into, but I do have the ability to grab some of those additional fields if they exist on one of the screens that I went to during that recording phase. So please join us in the next training video where we talk about how to map this new recording to our data source file.